Welcome to You Are the Media Now, a podcast about digital communication strategies that go beyond legacy media and empower businesses, brands, and individuals looking to land big impact on platforms that build empires. And now, here are your hosts, Scott Mitchell and yours truly, Ryan Welton.
The implications of the election on your communication strategy and getting your message to customers, to constituents, whatever is our discussion today. And joined by my good longtime friend, Ryan Welton of Doable Digital Media, the best data guy I know. Can I tell you that in the old days when I was working with clients, you had to dance and do tryouts to get in the media. If you were a nonprofit that dealt with a disease group or something, you had to prove to yourself, prove to the media at the time, the legacy media, this is a story worth getting out there. But I had to go through a gatekeeper. I had to go through you, or they had to go through me when I was a producer, and show me what you got. Okay, it was like Dancing with the Stars or The Voice or something like that, right? You had to prove to me. You had to take your message and filter it through somebody else before you could get to the masses. And if Election Day taught us anything, Ryan, it was that them days is over. Okay, the gatekeeper is dead. If you have the skills and the knowledge and the tools to go direct to your audience. And I'll just put that proposition out there. Is that a fair assessment of what the media is, especially the implications of what happened on Election Day?
Well, welcome to anybody who might be listening, because this is the inspiration for our conversations. You are the media now. Scott, you are the media now. Ryan, you are the media now. Whether you're a business, brand, an employee, one of many, an aspiring influencer, you are the media now. The idea that we have to go through legacy media as a point of first priority is dead. It's not that legacy media is dead. Local TV is important. Breaking news, severe weather, national TV has a place. Analysis, breaking news, weather. However, the idea that we have to dance for that gatekeeper is just one that we don't have to abide by anymore. I'm just looking here. The guy, his name is Kevin Kelly from Wired Magazine. He posed this proposition a long time ago, talking about your 1,000 true fans. And I will tell you, if you just look at the marketing funnel, if you get 1,000 people to pay $100 a month for anything, that pays the bills. The ramifications of the November 5th election weren't so much that comm strategy changed on that date. It's just that President-elect Donald Trump, his concept for a communication strategy that works direct to audience was proven at the highest of stakes.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that strategy. We saw a lot of discussion about going on Theo Vaughn's podcast and Joe Rogan's podcast. There was a lot of YouTube. Trump had a lot less money than the vice president, a lot less money, right? And the other aspect of this is that the Vice President Harris had this amazing paid-for ground game. There was the kind of the joke that the money had been given, the Trump money had been given to Elon Musk, who outsourced it, and nobody was knocking doors. I mean, just about all of the cultural discussion about what was happening on the ground through the legacy media turned out to be wrong, right? So there was something going on where that he was reaching people in a way that the cable shows, the network shows, the Washington Post and the New York Times, these sort of people, the print folks, they just got it wrong. So since he did this alternate sort of approach, and was it lucky or was that alternate approach effective? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that understanding that the audience that cares most about legacy media, whether it be television, newspaper, the audience that cares the most about that are the journalists themselves, the people who play TV. And I don't mean that pejoratively. Um, there's a reason why somebody might want to be on CNN or Fox. It is part of an old echo chamber, however. And this ecosystem, your Theo Vaughns, your Joe Rogans, your Charlie Kirks, Dan Bongino's, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly's, Ben Shapiro's, that audience building didn't start with this election. It had been done over years. And I have to think that Trump's campaign advisors understood this. The entire conservative media ecosystem has understood this for a long time. The people who listen to these podcasts are true believers. And it's not so much that President-elect Trump was playing to his base. He actually, I think his strategy was very smartly going after a very underappreciated audience, and that is young men. Now, mind you, this idea is not mine myself. I listened to the Pivot podcast, Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway, and Scott Galloway talked about the manosphere quite a bit. And the manosphere is definitely not an audience that's being served by local or national TV media. And in fact, on CNN's Chris Wallace show this morning, Kara Swisher was a guest, and she, I don't know if it was she who mentioned it, but somebody mentioned that when it was time to actually do the negotiations with Joe Rogan, the people on Kamala Harris's campaign were about to revolt over it. And not only was that a missed opportunity, I don't think it would have won her the election by any means. However, it was incredibly short-sighted. And what, Scott, you and I are talking about here is that November 5th didn't itself change everything, but it made it readily apparent that the game has changed forever.
All right. So you're a brand, you're a nonprofit, you're a lawyer. You're one of these folks out there that in the past would try to get some earned media by going through the gatekeeper. And you're looking at this and you're going, everything's changed. So what's my workflow now? I mean, what do I start thinking of in terms of moving forward on this?
Right. I call the formula ICED, ICED, ideation, creation, execution, distribution. That doesn't mean that there's not a level of professionalism that has to be aspired to. However, it's the concept, and being able to create content quickly and at scale over a long period of time with patience. That is the strategy. That does not mean that you don't employ an agency to help you. That does not mean that you don't pursue earned media. It's just not the end all be all. I remember when I was in corporate comms, my bosses would be super excited to have a link from a local TV station or a newspaper, but it didn't necessarily drive traffic to anything. In the olden days, entrepreneurs and business owners would tell you that it was all about word of mouth. Well, what is direct audience except word of mouth at scale? So whether you're a brand, a business, I see businesses with teams of employees, salespeople, other people who could be preaching the message of the organization, getting on the same page. I spoke to a practicum class at the University of Oklahoma the other day, and I essentially took them through an exercise. I said, do you need to get good with this formula, ideation, creation, execution, distribution, for yourself so that you could do it for anybody else? And whether it's for this next generation or anybody who wants to get into it, it is, in fact, a superpower. In addition to Donald Trump, Scott, I stayed up and watched the Jake Paul fight last night. That fight was underwhelming. There were other good fights, but you got to give it to Jake Paul for being a master marketer. Another guy who's gone to direct to audience. In the state of Oklahoma, you got Ryan Walters going direct to audience. It is, in fact, more powerful than the old way of doing things.
Could I use some examples? So this is 1993. A person, it is real life. So I'm going to take a real life example from, that's 30-something years ago. But 1993, the new president of the United States was named Bill Clinton. And he was coming with this thing called the Clinton Healthcare Plan, which failed. And not until the Affordable Care Act, there was a debate about this for many years. Back then, there were the legacy print, and then there were 3 networks. Plus, in those days, a new network called CNN had emerged, and there was a thing called Inside Politics with Brooks Jackson was the name of that show. And I was on one side of this, and you would fight this out in the legacy media, the earned media, so you could get on the Brooks Jackson show on CNN. Inside Politics ran about 6 p.m. DC time. That's what you worked on. I mean, you were trying to get attention for 3 networks, a PBS to an extent, McNeil era, and of course, print. But that was almost all. Everything we did back then was to try to get earned media and then just broadcast advertising for the most part, some in the big newspapers. Only 5 states were involved, by the way. The 5 states that were key to defeating the Clinton plan or passing it: Ohio, New York, California, Texas, and Oklahoma. Because Oklahoma had a Ways and Means member, the Senate Finance Chair, where all this healthcare stuff was going through, a fellow by the name of Senator David Warren. Dave McCurdy was a friend of Clinton. Bill Brewster, the late Bill Brewster, was on Ways and Means. So those were the states, ironically. Now our delegation is now very powerful again. But the fact is that's how we did it. So it's 2024. Somebody comes with an idea. It's going to be fought out in the states. Taking what was done in 1993, how would you suggest it be done in 2024?
Right. So if you're starting with the problem, you're probably too late. That's the reason why it's so important if you're in that space to already have been on these platforms, because you don't grow an audience overnight. Now, mind you, there are some triggers. If there's a big event, they call that newsjacking. When something happens, you just get right on it and start talking about it. But in 2024, you take it to the people. There is a fella out of North Carolina who was a congressman, and I think he won his election to become North Carolina's Attorney General. His name is Jeff Jackson. He just took his message to the people. Now, when you're looking at the platforms, you got your vertical video. You've got your Facebook Reels, your Instagram Reels, your YouTube Shorts, and you got your TikToks. And now, mind you, an omni-channel strategy is what you want to do. However, when you're just looking in terms of barriers to entry and the easiest markets to penetrate, TikTok is it. And Jeff Jackson would go to TikTok and talk about things happening in Congress and take his message to the people. Now, one of the things that politicians in particular do really well is that they have a message that they want to get out there. It might be in your case, as you were talking about the Clinton healthcare plan, it might be that you want to talk about and focus mostly about why the Clinton healthcare plan is bad. But you have to have sort of an equal and opposite reaction. You got to have something you're for and something you're against, or something you're against and something you're for. For example, President Trump would talk about making America great again. But what was he against? He was against an unfiltered number of immigrants coming across the border. Ryan Walters in the state of Oklahoma, what is he for? Bringing religion and patriotism back to schools. What is he against? He's against woke. So in terms of a communication strategy, that's really important. But if you're expecting to solve a problem today, you're going to have to go at it 10,000 times the speed and strength that you would if you would actually take the time now to develop that communication strategy direct to audience. Again, this is why President-elect Trump did really well in the conservative podcast ecosystem, although I wouldn't call Joe Rogan a true conservative, more of a populist. However, whether you're Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Megyn Kelly, Dan Bongino, Candace Owens, or Joe Rogan, they have spent years building that audience. That's why if you have aspirations for doing anything over the next 5 years, your time to start this is right now, so that when that problem or that issue comes up, you will have an audience ready to go, ready to listen to you. Because the thing is that if I were to go out there with this message saying that the Clinton healthcare plan was bad and people don't know who I am, they would be like, who is this guy? Whereas if you've built an audience on any topic, eventually people get to make the decision, do I like Ryan or do I not like Ryan? And if they like Ryan, they're going to be way more open to anything and any message that I got for them.
All right, so start now. So the next question I would have for you is, what do I start? I mean, there is a plethora of platforms. I mean, there is YouTube Shorts, then you have Facebook and Reels and Stories, and I mean, there are so many things to pick from. I can see that the barrier to entry is just, it's so daunting, these lists
Right.
that I'm looking at in terms of what I want to. So, how does a person, the old saying about how to eat elephant, one bite at a time?
You bet.
What are the bites that I should be taking? I'm hearing what you have to say,
Right.
but I'll hire a PR firm for $10,000 to start talking to me. I mean, wait a minute. I need to make some decisions on my own, don't I?
100%. Now, here's the thing. We talk about barriers of entry. One of those barriers is the feeling of paralysis. I get it, because anytime that we decide that, we're going to put ourselves out there, we spend a lot of time consuming information from the Gary Vaynerchuks, the Sean Cannells of the world, instead of actually pressing play, which is what Think Media recommends. The way I have positioned Doable Digital Media so that it could be a partner to PR and advertising agencies is more that we're about vertical video strategy, newsletter ideation and execution, podcast launch and promotion, and YouTube support in general. So I think the thing that you have to ask yourself is, how well do you know yourself? Are you an extrovert or you're an introvert? If you're more of an introvert, then probably the newsletter strategy is going to be a little bit more important for you. But I would just ask folks to pick two: vertical video and YouTube, vertical video and podcast. I mean, if you wanted to be brave and bold and get into all four, by all means. It is a lot of work and a lot of commitment. So I would say the place where you start is just decide which platforms that you want to attack. Most people will include vertical video in that. I would say that make that your default and then pick one of the other three. By the way, vertical video and YouTube pair really well with each other, especially if you consider the combination of shorts and long form video. Podcasts, you're not going to do a podcast without video these days. Anybody who thinks they're going to just do an audio podcast, you're sorely mistaken. I need to work on my background here. I totally get it from a video perspective. However, video is really important because they need to see the whites of your eyes. They need to see the smile on your face and know that you're genuine about what you talk about. What do you need? You need a tripod, some lighting, a lav mic or good audio, and then you're ready to go. I mean, you probably want to have some strategy sessions to talk about your message, but I will tell you, I grew a TikTok channel talking about random things, and then I just waited for what sticks. And you say, well, that's not a strategy. It is a strategy to build an audience, because oftentimes the algorithms of these platforms will tell you what the audience thinks of you and encourages you to talk about what they think. So if I'm a policymaker, maybe you're just introducing yourself to the world and what you stand for. And then you go from healthcare to finance to culture issues and find out what resonates with the audience, and then give them more of that. Think if I'm a chef and I've got a restaurant and you've got your menu and you decide that you really love these 5 dishes that you make, but the audience's response is that they only like 2, then maybe you're killing the other 3 and you're focusing on the 2 and finding 3 or 4 more dishes that you can bring to the table that really excite them as much as that first 2. So there's a lot of A/B testing, a lot of trial and error, but to get started, you need message, you need passion, a tripod, a phone, a ring light, or some sort of lighting. Did you know that influencers mostly record their videos at sunrise or sunset, and they just mostly take advantage of natural lighting? And then a mic of some sort. So it just doesn't take a lot.
All right, that's great advice. So it's not that hard to get started. And you named some names, the Sean Cannells and the Gary Vaynerchuk. Are like, just turn it on. Just hit record. Okay, that's how they do. All right. Let's talk about focus. There are a lot of folks out there that, let's take state agencies. Let's take a health-related agency that's trying to reach 18 to 34-year-olds. And very famously, we hear conversations about they're throwing tons of money at that particular group. And you look at where they're spending the money and go, there's no 18 to 34-year-olds there. But there's big commissions at where they're spending that money, okay? And so there's some cynicism in this, and especially whenever the client is kind of clueless or naive about how this works. So let's start with the CEO, the CFO level, the HR level. First, you've got to be savvy about what you're spending now. All right. Are you getting ripped off? Is it not a good ROI in the way you're spending? So you've got to know the target that you want. And if you know what targets you're aiming at, you've got to pretty well understand, getting into your field of data, where the 18 to 34, where are they, for example? And second, I mean, are they susceptible to a 20-second message? Are they a 3-minute message? The people watching Joe Rogan are susceptible 3 hours, right? So you've got to figure out what age it is and the length of it. And then third factor, you keep talking very much warranted about vertical video and how that factors in. So the mix is something that could be a barrier to entry, because you've got to get all of this stuff lined up correctly. Help unpack that Rubik's Cube that you've got to line up to know where you're going to go.
And it depends who you're doing this for. When I think about 18 to 34 year old audiences, I think about, well, you have the male version of that. You have the female version of that. And there is some crossover. If you had a Venn diagram, there would absolutely be some crossover. One of the things that podcasts and the podcast hosts like Joe Rogan provide is an embrace of curiosity. And that's something that you don't see in the legacy media. There's narrative, there's agenda, there's a style of questions and answers that happen. There's a tone of voice, there's the anchor voice, there's the newspaper writing style, inverted pyramid. On the other hand, with the Joe Rogan 3-hour podcast, Joe's just asking questions because he's curious. And I would just advise agencies to embrace that level of curiosity and to ask their audience ahead of a campaign what it is they're curious about. The thing about a strategy that involves vertical video is that it probably does emanate from something much longer. And I think that agencies, or whether it be a PR advertising or an actual government agency, they have to be willing to experiment. For example, when I talk to folks about Facebook ads, and Facebook ads are still powerful. Remember, people 18 to 34, they're still on Facebook. They just don't post. They're hovering, right? So they want to see what they're doing, but they're not posting. They're still consuming content, including reels. In fact, a lot of times when you ask people where they see or where they saw a certain vertical video, they can't tell you. Was it Facebook? Was it Instagram? Was it YouTube Shorts? Was it TikTok? I don't know. I just saw the vertical videos somewhere. However, when you're actually putting a piece of content out there and you're putting a little bit of money behind it, you simply take a very simple A/B strategy. Maybe it's an ABCDEF strategy. When you put 4 or 5 different pieces of content, spend $1 or $2 and start to refine. Spend $1 or $2 on the actual promotion or the boosting of it, and start to refine what works. You do little small marketing experiments to find out what's working for that particular age group. But I would say even more than a specific marketing formula, just embracing curiosity. I mean, if you watched President-elect Trump's when he was candidate Trump, his interview with Theo Vaughn, it was wacky and it was out there. And former President Trump at the time, he just rolled with it. And I think there is a discomfort in the unknown. If you're spending dollars with an agency or an employee to help you do it yourself, or just doing it yourself, you're like, what are other people going to think? Am I going to be climbing Cringe Mountain? I would say embracing the discomfort of that process in hopes that you land on something serendipitously is really important, because if you do this enough, you will get better at it as you go, and you will eventually land on a style of communication that fits your goal as an agency or business and starts to win over that audience. So if you're going for 18 to 34-year-olds, I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to attack podcasts or attack vertical video. I would say that you probably need to find somebody who looks like them, who represents that audience, and you need to get out there and start talking about the message. But Scott, when you start to get down to the nitty-gritty of the message, it also can't be terribly corporatized or jargonized. You have to talk like your audience. And I think that's where embracing folks who are within the audience that you're trying to reach is going to be really important. In the news business, Scott, there have been lots of conversations about how do we get 18 to 34-year-olds, or especially 18 to 24-year-olds, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, to watch the news. And the fact is, they're never again going to watch a newscast. It's not happening. It's over. It is now about ubiquitous content consumption, but they don't want to see a 54-year-old man giving them the news. They're out on that.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this mix. You just said something that I'm starting to see, and I become curious about how this works, and I'll ask a 25-year-old or a 34-year-old, where do you get your news? It's not legacy media, okay? And that's an unscientific approach, which is just about as good as the polling for the last 3 presidential elections. But the thing that I'm seeing, and you were talking about doing things early, and you see so many of the folks, and by the way, these are people that are buying brands and they're serving on jury pools and all these sorts of things. If you can't reach them in the old days, think the Tylenol situation many decades ago, right? That they had to do all the damage control on legacy media.
Mhm.
Now, let's say your brand is under attack. You've been accused of a crime or accused of something that's not true, or you are being with a state question, these sorts of things.
Right.
You can't really anticipate that, I suppose, that you're going to have your communications, but all of a sudden your preference is, get out ahead early. But if you have to stand something up fast, although that's not your preferred route, how do you approach these sorts of things? Because a brand attack can be devastating to your business. And the old formula would be go buy a bunch of TV, bunch of radio. And we're hearing that these really important consumer groups just aren't there.
Right. So crisis communications is something that back in my corporate comm days, we table exercised for quite a bit, and we would have an issue here or there. However, all platforms are valid for crisis communication. Typically, if there is a sort of a digital controversy, however, if your issue is on X, former Twitter, attack it there. If there was something that a viral video, you attack the response on wherever the platform was. However, an omni-channel problem in 2024 requires an omni-channel approach. That's why bigger organizations or savvier organizations do executive video training. Because, if I'm representing a large company and something awful happens, I think about the airlines and flight delays and some of that snafu that we've had in the past. Having a video with your executive that isn't highly jargonized, that isn't highly corporate, that sounds like it's coming from a person, is really important. So getting ahead of executive training and telling your directors, your VPs, your presidents, your C-suite that, hey, we actually need to practice this. I know that it's going to take a little bit of time out of your schedule, but let's set one day a quarter where we do nothing but practice these crisis communication scenarios. Instagram is an incredible platform for crisis communications. Why the news business doesn't embrace Instagram more for telling stories, and some are, but why they don't use it more, especially to Instagram, admittedly, in TV business, the demo is typically 25 to 54-year-old women. Instagram's the best platform in the world for that. However, an omni-channel approach, which would include X, which would include TikTok, which would include Facebook, which would include YouTube, which would include written, which would include a message on your site, which would also include legacy and earned media. The thing is that an omni-channel approach, in the moment, if you're not prepared and haven't practiced those processes, you're going to be in a world of hurt. But an organization that produces a formula for handling that in the moment is going to be much more successful in cutting it off. Scott, when I think about the Tylenol situation, and I remember when that happened in the early to mid 80s, the thing that they could afford back then that you cannot afford now is time. It's space. When something happens, you have to be on it right then. We talk a lot about in the news business about newsjacking, which is a concept that we should devote an entire episode about. But the concept is that when breaking news or something big happens, you want to grab a little bit of attention on that topic and get out there and start talking, even if you're not perfectly ready. In a situation that is crisis communication, ideally the brand or the person impacted would be among the first to say something, even if you say, I don't have all the facts, I'm trying to investigate. We as an organization are going to get to the bottom of this. Just be genuine, but be timely.
I'm going to assume that this is correct. If I'm wrong, help me out here. Newsjacking.
Yeah.
You're an organization that works with Parkinson's. The day Michael J. Fox reveals that he's suffering from Parkinson's, and on multi-channels, you're talking about things that you can do to help patients, to the medicines, the therapies. Is that a good example of newsjacking?
You bet. But let me give you the scale. Is that when that news happens, you're not having 4 or 5 days of meetings to decide what your response is going to be. You have your first video out in the first hour. Newsjacking requires a commitment to your phone and being willing to turn on alerts for all sorts of things and to consume content at all hours of the day, because you never know when news that will impact your brand is going to happen. And the thing is that oftentimes companies relegate this to their PR teams, and that's fine. But you as a leader or an entrepreneur, if you're not also consuming it, you're going to lose time in the race to be among the first to talk about that. So yeah, if I think about the day that Michael J. Fox announced this, but what about breakthroughs in Parkinson's that might impact your organization or impact your funding? You want to be one of the first to be talking about it. And more importantly, this speaks to things that we talked about a little bit earlier. You want to have been spending months and years establishing yourself, not only as the expert on the topic, but as a likable guy. It's really important. The Q rating, they call it in the TV business.
All right. So, for example, in journalism school before electricity, we learned that on the local level, something happened in Washington, we tried to localize it. How does it affect folks, the target audience? So you could use that sort of idea if you're a brand and something happens, the president comes out and says, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. You actually participate in X, Y, and Z. First hour, you start talking about this.
100%. Even if you're just relaying the message, think about this. Paul Revere, he was one of the first influencers. The British are coming. The British are coming. All he's doing is spreading the word. It's not analysis. It's not his take on it. It's great to have a take. In fact, I think that opinion and analysis is super underrated in journalism. Objectivity, super overrated. I promise you, that's why the conservative media is winning. And that's why I'm telling you, Democrats, progressives, moderates, they don't have that platform. You got to really dive in and build an audience. By the way, it's something that I hope happens because it would provide a little bit balance to the ecosystem. However, being quick and providing a take, sometimes you just have to say, here's what I heard that came in from Washington. I don't know anymore right at the moment, but I'm going to keep you posted.
Something else that you've touched on, which is being genuine. You know, the standard in the industry, and there's huge margins in this, is PR advertising marketing firms doing very hot mini camera, multi layered shooting in Panavision, for example, making it very, very slick. When you talk about being genuine, I mean, if you're shooting, not that iPhones don't have good cameras on them, they do, but that, number one, the margins on that are not very high if you're shooting with your iPhone. But is there more believability now in this atmosphere with stuff that's got a little more edge to it, a little more raw than the highly processed sort of videos that we see in television commercials and corporate videos, for example?
Anytime you do something highly processed, it's going to cost money and it's going to cost time. There is an authenticity to just a simple shot and you talking. You know, one of the lessons that I would give anybody is that you're not talking to everybody. You're talking to one person. I hope whoever's watching this right now, I hope you're getting that sense that I want to connect with you. I want to connect with everybody, but I really want to connect with you. And you only need a phone or a webcam to do this. Sure, there is a place for something that is much more polished. But again, that's one part of a much larger strategy, and it's for a different audience. For example, if I'm creating something for Netflix or Hulu, I probably want it to be polished. But for TikTok, I mean, iPhone, DSLR camera, you know, on the iPhone, little trick for you, use the cinematic mode of shooting, and it will look really good. And that's all you need. just start talking, because in the end, you don't know what the algorithm is going to think about what you have to say. And that algorithm is driven by audience. And folks like to feel like they're talking to somebody who gets them and gets their problems. And I'll take it back to the November 5th election. That's the thing that President-elect Trump did better than anybody else. He made people think, right or wrong, that he understood their everyday problems.
This has been fascinating. And I think that for a lot of us that was watching or were watching English teacher regularly, I'm sure looks down and says, man, what a terrible student. Since last week, when we saw the election, you could sense in the 24 hours after the results that the world was changing, not just public policy, okay, but also the way people are going to be communicating. Now, we've talked about this for years in limited forums, every way from the different platforms to length of how this platform should be, all that. But I think the implications of what happened were that, well, this is a real thing now. If you're a business, trade organization, a nonprofit, if you're not looking at these takeaways deadly serious about how that you look at your communications, and if you've been floating along thinking it's just always going to be this way, it's not. It's not. And there are so many things we could get into. I'm wondering if I could talk you into doing this on a recurring basis.
Absolutely. And we haven't even touched on the plethora of topics that are related to this, because I would hope that we could just get really granular about process, about issues, talk about things that have happened in the media that week, the legacy media. And that brings me to a point that I wanted to mention and suggest to you, Scott, is that, what do we call this? We've thought about different things like own the narrative, own the feed, direct to audience. But the truth is, and Elon Musk amplified this, but it wasn't his term to invent. And that was, you are the media. And it's not that just that you are the media, you, the individual, the influencer, the entrepreneur, the business owner, the politician, the policymaker. Yes, you are the media, but more important than that, you are the media now. Not next year, not after you get your budget set. There's no reason to not start this right now and really seriously be considering your direct to audience strategy, because, again, this election proved at the highest of stakes that this strategy works. We're not trying to sell you on anything except the urgency that is needed with this. And I get really pumped talking about this, but the fact is that you are not just the media now. I am the media now. We don't have to go through the old ways of doing this. And those of us, we're not going to be on the front end. The people who are doing this successfully have been doing this successfully for years. However, there's a lot of space in this building. There's a lot of space in this arena. And again, 2025, it's going to be a big year for direct audience, and it's just starting. I liken it to be the third or fourth digital content revolution. And it exclamation on November 5th. You are the media now.
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point.
What we're seeing is you're an iconoclast on this, because if people want to defeat the algorithm, if they want to get past what's left of the gatekeeper, if they want to get past the age differences, they're going to have to do their own. They are going to be the media, and it's going to start with them doing some real frank assessments about how they communicate.
Right. And getting comfortable with the concept that, talking to that class the other day, even people who are 19, 20, 21 years old, they're not necessarily comfortable being on camera and getting that criticism or judgment that happens on the other end. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this quite a bit. We overestimate what people think of us when we put ourselves out there. Again, I would ask anybody, and we could devote an entire episode about this and talking about what is it you want to talk about to get good at this, but really just ask yourself, what could you talk about for 1 hour extemporaneously with no notes? That's what extemporaneously means, just off the cuff, a topic with enthusiasm, passion, and expertise, and then go to town. And for most of you who are brands, business owners, employees, politicians, policymakers, that's going to be your livelihood. So again, you're the media now. As soon as you're done listening to this, get your phone out, record your first video. You will not be sorry. And if you are sorry, you will get better with the second one and the third and the fourth and the fifth. It takes practice and it takes time.
It does. I've seen Sean Cannell. I watch their videos a lot, Think Media. I've watched him. He put up his first video that he ever did. It's
You feel bad.
And also, if you want to prove to yourself, do what I'm doing right now, which is I started the day after the election with my friends. We would be chatting, and I would say, by the way, where do you get your news? If you ask 10 friends, at the end of 10 friends, you will go, wow, I did not know this.
Right.
Okay. You will find things you've never thought of. I've got a 34-year-old. I ask him, Trump voter, okay, where do you get your news? Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, different places on the internet.
Yeah.
Got younger kids in my family and their friends. And guess what? I'm not seeing very much legacy media. Okay. And that 18 to 34 group, their viewing and reading habits are vastly different than mine.
Yeah.
So if you're a B2B or that you're a nonprofit, it would behoove you to just do yourself like a rolling poll. Just to ask a friend, how are you consuming news these days?
How are you consuming news? And I will tell you, and I think you would agree with me. Journalism is super important. If you're not working in a newscast of some kind or a newspaper, especially, think about all the communities that are news deserts. Local news is so important. The process of vetting information for the truth is vital. And by the way, Scott, this message is for the journalism community who is really more in love with the platforms that they already are on, which are just distribution channels than anything else. Journalism is vital. We need to raise the discourse, but we also have to be realistic about where people are getting their news and information. I don't poo-poo Theo Vaughn. I love Theo Vaughn. I don't poo-poo Joe Rogan. I listen. Do I agree with everything that's on there? Absolutely not. But I also am working in a New York Times and a CNN and all the cable platforms. And I watch local newscasts. I've been part of local newscasts for the past 20 years. They are important. But let's get real. You're right. People aren't getting their information there. And it's not changing ever again. It's over, yo. Over.
And the really smart legacy media understands that. I will tell you how I'll be able to give you a 5-year plan here for legacy media that understands this. In 5 years, the ones who don't understand it won't be around.
Right. And in fact, I would say my advice for local TV is that fewer newscasts, podcasts galore, newsletters galore, YouTube focus galore, less focus on the core product. It's going to hurt financially, but it's a long-term winner.
It's fascinating. The whole thing is fascinating. Okay, so we're going to keep on doing this. You talked me into it, and there are so many things that people want to learn. So we'll start this, and I want to thank Ryan Welton. I tell people that I've occasionally wonder if Ryan Welton is not really a weighing computer with legs and the way that you churn data. But that's been something that I've been in the last 20 years drives me when people are coming at me with information. What does the data say? And the data says that the shift is underway. The data indicates that a candidate who really, when you start seeing people reject 60 Minutes,
right,
get away with it.
Right. Hey, by the way, one point I didn't mention, Donald Trump didn't even want to do the debate with Kamala Harris. You know what? He didn't need to. We could have an entire episode about the death of debates moving forward, because I don't know that they'll die in future election cycles, especially at the local level. And I think they're extremely important. They may just take on another fashion where one candidate appears with one broadcaster or narrowcaster, and the other candidate does the same separately. It may be that we're just, who knows? That's a topic for another time. But you're right. Eschewing 60 Minutes, eschewing traditional debates, that's not just the wave of the future. Again, that's part of being the media now. You don't need it.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your time in the future as we get into this. the next few weeks in terms of the transition and right now the navel gazing that's going on inside of legacy media is fascinating to watch. But we'll even start sharing some of the platforms we think are really, really smart that are getting it. I'll give you one right off the top here in Oklahoma, right? Non-doc. I mean, they are right now have become maybe the most dominant print organization at the state capitol. And guess what? They ain't print.
Right. But there are print elements because they go deep with the writing. And of course, we're both fans of Traces and we're both fans of what they do. But there's nobody who's covering government organizations at the granular level like they are. Nobody. Public meetings, public debates. However, they have embraced the newsletter part of this strategy. Yes, it's online, but they have newsletters that encapsulate that. And they go at it at a detail that you would just wish that other local news outlets and newspapers and online entities would. They do a fantastic job.
I'll give you a second one. And this is, you talk about deep in legacy media. For those of you who watch Alex Cameron report from DC, you mentioned shooting your iPhone in cinematic mode. Guess what? I don't think I'm giving any secrets away here. Okay. Alex Cameron, when you see that kind of faded out background, he is often shooting things in DC of the highest importance on an iPhone in cinematic mode.
Right. Think about this for Alex Cameron, though. All internal communications is external. So he's communicating information to Oklahomans of national and local import. But he also has an audience amongst the policymakers in Washington. I don't know if you saw the photo of Senator Lankford with Alex Cameron wishing him a happy birthday. Alex is well-liked. And you know why he's well-liked? It's because he's highly trusted. And that audience he has cultivated over time. Not with TikToks, not with Instagram, but interpersonal communication is still at the root of this. Either you're likable and trustworthy or you're not. And Alex is the highest.
And his birthday greetings from Ann, his wife, for 5 years now, doesn't interact with producers, directors, bosses. 5 years, toting that iPhone around, getting those stories with an iPhone. And I think that's a good place to end up on, Ryan. You mentioned, turn it around, press the button. That's what Alex Cameron is doing to the two biggest markets in Oklahoma with this.
Yeah, I'll save it for another episode, but there are some very specific examples from this election cycle that he and his wife both did that added to the news value that we were putting on here in Oklahoma City. But yeah, you just got to turn the phone around and go. In fact, I would say that anytime you see something, just record it. You don't have to be obnoxious. Just press play.
Great advice. This has been fascinating and my great appreciation. I'm ready to take time and help us understand as we try to cut through the haze of what just happened on Election Day in terms of how that can impact your life, your business, your church, your organization in a positive way and get your message. Listen, we're all, as Vaynerchuk says, we're all day trading for attention. But day traders that make money are really smart and they're going to be using the latest data-driven information to do what they do. And nobody knows data better than Ryan Welton.
I appreciate that, man.
See you next time.
You've been listening to You Are the Media Now, a podcast about digital communications. Hosted by Scott Mitchell and Ryan Welton. You can find Scott at Mitchell Talks and Ryan at doabledigitalmedia.com. This episode was produced by Ryan Welton, and the theme music, Anaheim Blonde, was written and produced by Ryan Welton.